Hello, I am Jorisse Gumanay from the College of Communication, Art and Design of the University of the Philippines, Cebu. I'll be presenting my paper called Faith and Fear in the Church, an analysis of supernatural tales in St. Joseph the Patriarch Parish, Mabolo. I began this paper as part of my PhD studies at Silliman University for my class on mythology and folklore. And I specifically chose this particular church because I am a parishioner of this church, having lived in Hippodromo for the better part of my life. So I grew up attending Mabolo Church or St. Joseph the Patriarch Parish. In my paper, I explored the idea of how Catholic churches in the Philippines have been at the center of the people's lives in the society. Specifically, it is where we as Catholics are welcome to the world in the form of baptism, and it is where significant events in life happen, such as weddings and such. And finally, in death, it is also where Catholics receive their final tributes of love from their loved ones and from the community. And even beyond death, I believe the church also holds an important role wherein loved ones left behind by the person still continue to pray for the eternal repose of the deceased. And that is why, as stated by Shirley, since the colonial times, Catholicism has come to define the identities of millions of Filipinos. The church is viewed with much pride and respect by everyone in the community. Still, because Filipino Catholicism tends to mix folkloric beliefs with religion, the church itself can also be a source of much superstition. So it's not immune to folkloric beliefs in supernatural entities. And it's something interesting that I found in my study because I've always heard so many tales of this particular church being haunted. And I thought that was interesting since the church, as a place of worship, should have been immune to such entities. But I've always heard this idea that the church was more haunted by the cemetery rather than the cemetery. So I explored that idea here in this paper. This paper looks closely at some of the oral stories in this community, specifically in and around St. Joseph the Patriarch Parish in Barangay Mabolo in Cebu City. And I explored how they relate to the community's religious beliefs and local folklore, especially in relation to the supernatural and the mythical. In my theoretical framework, I explored the ideas of the folklore theorist Alan Dundes, who said that folklore is crucial to knowing human experience, for he called it autobiographical ethnography, or how people describe themselves. As such, you cannot study folklore independently or by itself. You must study it within its cultural and historical context, which is what I tried to do with this paper. I also explored some ideas by Filipino folklorists, such as that of E. Arsenio Manuel, who said that in our national literature, there are only two sources, and that's creative writing and folklore. Unfortunately, the latter is uh, much or not as much discussed as creative writing. We tend to be dismissive of folklore, especially since we just call it native beliefs and such. Unfortunately, or this is rather unfortunate, since folklore is the most immersive type of art or literature, according to Manuel. Muharas also emphasizes the value of oral traditions as part of folk history, since this type of memory, called folk memory, may not yield historical facts, but they are great insights into our culture since they contain historical values that are as important as the bare facts. There's also the ideas of Asman and Seplika, who acknowledge that cultural memory has many variables, but they place significance in studying folklore or cultural memory because they place a group in a larger context in relation to cultural heritage. And cultural heritage, of course, is what makes a society visible to itself and to others. And the past that we discover in cultural heritage can give us a lot of insight about the constitution and the tendencies of a society. There are also the ideas of Levi Strauss, who believed that folk stories are good identifiers of universal human structures, especially his beliefs in binary oppositions. For example, in Filipino folklore, stories tend to have a close relationship with nature, which tells us of the great significance that our ancestors gave to the environment and to the surroundings. So we have a lot of folkloric beliefs that tell about our close relationship with nature, such as mythical creatures guarding their houses in the form of trees, hills, mountains, rivers, and more. In my study, I also explored archetypes, which are very common in folklore studies. Archetypal literary criticism looks at recurring aspects in the form of images, symbols, and more. And I place this within the religious, traditional, and mythical framework of the society, which can give us a lot of ideas about uh, what kind of society we are studying. So I'm utilizing that critical framework along with the guidelines or ideas from Dundes. This is a qualitative research using analysis and interpretation of the texts that I have gathered. There are 10 types of oral narratives that I have studied, and I will be summarizing them here. For example, I have found a lot of stories about nuns, specifically a nun in black, and I found that they are guardians of the living, but also symbols of authority. Of course, nuns are a popular horror archetype as well, along with ghosts of priests, which I have found to be a symbol of power, as they are spiritual shepherds, and their presence in the afterlife, so to speak, is a depiction of their continuation of devotion. I've also found many oral narratives of shadow figures, which are dark figures with no shape, which may possess dark magic. I also found narratives about poltergeists. The term, of course, originates from German folklore. These types of ghosts are disruptive and observable, and they are bad spirits seeking retribution. There are also restless spirits, which are souls stuck in purgatory, seeking heavenly rest. They are harmless compared to poltergeists, and they merely ask for help and intercession. As with many other ghost stories or supernatural stories in the Philippines, I've also found narratives about a white lady in the church, which is a very common ghost archetype. Most of the time, the white lady archetype point towards women with tragic lives who may be seeking vengeance. I also found a narrative of an agta, a tree-dwelling, cigar-smoking creature, also known as a capre, in one of the trees from the church. In Visayan belief, the agta is gentle and loves to play tricks. Interestingly, I also found narratives about a black hound, which is a large black dog with ink black fur and fiery red eyes, which is actually a known archetype, which can be taken as an omen of death, or the popular church guardian called the Grim, which seeks to protect churches from sacrilege. There's also the San Telmo, which is rooted in the Saint Elmo phenomenon among sailors, which actually has a scientific explanation and was previously taken as a good omen. Unfortunately, in Visayan lore, San Telmo is a restless spirit that haunts the living in swamps and fields. I also found narratives of Duende, which are little magical beings residing in mountains or small hills that are found within the church, and they may be good or evil. But mostly they are used to warn away children from such perhaps natural formations, lest that they be of disturbance to these so-called creatures. So all of these narratives are found within this church. They are part of the oral heritage. They are transmitted orally throughout the generations, and they are also part of the folklore of the local community. In my analysis of all of the narratives, I found that they illustrate a fascination of what comes after death, or a fascination of this other world, which illustrates people's beliefs about the afterlife, or a world that is beyond their understanding. I also included some ideas from other scholars, such as that of Cunningham, who said that there is no set doctrines or moral practices in Catholic teachings that can explain apparitions or ghosts. So there is no specific canon law that issues um, guidelines on Catholic beliefs regarding this particular aspect of life. However, the unique concept of the purgatory from Catholic belief um, explains where these ghosts reside, at the same time reinforcing a belief in the afterlife. Because Catholicism, after all, is anchored in the belief of the supernatural, the existence of the Trinity, one of which is the Holy Ghost. Christianity also believes in ghosts as disembodied spirits that are allowed to appear to people who are on earth, perhaps to warn, teach, or request assistance from the living. So all of these narratives or stories can explain or point towards the idea that there exists a life after death, as Kreeft explains. So there is no contradiction between Catholic theology and ghosts or anything considered to be supernatural. As a matter of fact, according to MacAndrew, stories about ghosts remove uncertainty about one of life's greatest mysteries, a person's death, or regarding a person's death and what may happen after. That is why each religion has an explanation for death, and these ghost stories may illustrate what could be on the other side, assuring believers that death is not necessarily the end of all consciousness and life. So, religions around the world have a wide array of supernatural entities, such as gods, angels, spirits, even miracles. And these are used so that we will have important discourse surrounding our cultural traditions and literary narratives and religious beliefs, according to Lee. And these beliefs correlate to our attitudes about life and death, and what may be real and what is not. After all, according to Nicole, religion is regulatory in nature, and ghosts are thought to be tormented souls, people who are suffering for their sins in the afterlife while stuck in purgatory. So their so-called existence, so to speak, even in the form of supernatural tales, reinforces Catholic traditions, especially in the Philippines, wherein souls or the departed require constant prayer for the deceased. And they are also part of the identity of the society in the belief of the afterlife. And they can even strengthen people's religious fervor, reinforcing the importance of leading a good life. As such, all of these tales only constitute in the idea of the church as a symbol of power, as it has been for many centuries in the Philippines. In conclusion, these supernatural tales from St. Joseph the Patriarch Parish illustrate the rich culture of folklore in the area, and they link with the religious identity of the people, especially in relation to their folk traditions, keeping the culture of storytelling alive. These stories, I believe, are associated with our beliefs in the afterlife and in otherworldly creatures, and this illustrates how we bridge the modern world with the traditional. The analysis of the archetypes demonstrate the universality of meaning of some of the symbolisms and the ideas behind them. As such, I have found that these supernatural tales are of cultural and historical significance, which can lead to a deeper understanding of the identity of the local community. That ends my discussion of my paper. Here are my references. Thank you. That ends my presentation.